are actually from different ages. And that's true if what Benford and Marino said was true. And actually, there was a great skeptic who was one of the people who were studying the shroud at the start back in 78 when it was first looked at by scientists, Ray Rogers, who came at this from saying, I'm going to prove Benford and Marino wrong. I can do it in 5 minutes. And what he did when he actually looked at the cloth, when he studied it, because he was a good scientist, he looked at the figures and the facts objectively outside of what he wanted to believe was true. And he actually ended up, rather than proving them wrong, he proved them right. And he proved that actually the carbon dating was wrong. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. So to get back to the image on the shroud, this is a photographic negative. It's not painted on. There's no pigment on there. The thickness of the image is much, much less than the thickness of a human hair. Less than a thousandth of a millimeter is actually carrying the image. And it's carried in the way that the actual molecular structure of the cloth has been altered. And one way that the scientists have been able to replicate this change in the structure of the cloth that is actually consistent is that they've tried shining ultraviolet lasers on cloth, and they found that a similar change happened. But this wasn't just like someone playing around with the laser. And come on now, we're talking about, even the skeptics say this is at least 600 years ago. Well, we're not just talking about someone playing around with the laser. We're talking about laser light that shone from the body of a man that the cloth was wrapping. Okay, so and it had to shine. This dead body of the man that the cloth was wrapping had to shine brighter than the sun for less than a millionth of a second to actually form this image. And we know that the light came from his body because it's got what the scientists call distance-coded information. It's the only photograph that has 3D information in it that is known to science, that is actually where light has directly formed a three-dimensional holographic image just by the process of shining onto an objective, onto the cloth. Now, how did this happen? That was what the people who were there at the talk were talking about. How did the light change the cloth and so on. The subject of my talk was, how does a corpse shine brighter than the sun? Why does that happen? Now, interestingly, if you look at the evidence, that there were some eminent scientists who were looking at where did this cloth come from, when did it come from, and so on. And there was Israeli scientist there who showed from looking at the imprints of flowers that had been on the cloth that it must have been somewhere around Jerusalem, somewhere around March or April, around 2,000 years ago. Okay. Now, the pathologists who have studied this image in great detail have found that this dead body that was wrapped in the cloth had been crucified. It had been impaled by some kind of spear in the side. It had before he died, he had a sharp object placed on his head, like a crown of thorns. So, now, these are things that can only be discovered by using modern forensic pathology, that a forger wouldn't have known how to put these things on there, that the blood has even separated. I don't want to go into too much technical detail because it's all there for anyone who wants to study it in more depth. But apart from the human blood, which is they've found this male human blood on there, blood group AB, the rest of the image is not anything that's been added to the cloth. It's a change in the surface fibers of the cloth brought about by light. Now, this brings me on to what I really wanted to get to, is that if you try to understand how that could happen, you have to bear in mind that this historical character that this body must have been can't be just a coincidence that this is the one person who has had the biggest impact on human history through something that he taught and the way that he lived. And what did he teach and how did he live? If you look at tying this together with Nigel's thesis of union against separation, it was the idea of loving your neighbor as yourself, the idea that actually try to defeat entropy, try to defeat the this thing that's breaking things apart. Jesus actually taught about the second law of thermodynamics and said that this is a natural feature of everything material. He was talking about this 2,000 years ago in layman's terms, but he said it in the ways that any scientist now would understand, that rust breaks things down, moths corrupt things, thieves break in and steal things. Basically, everything that's physical will break down. And he was pointing to another existence where things don't break down. They last forever. They're not bounded by time. Now, I won't go into great depth about details about quantum theory, but I just want to say that some people may have heard of Schrödinger's cat, the quantum theory. Now, the man that's named after, who's actually one of the greatest innovative minds in quantum theory, actually made some huge realizations about the nature of mind, to do with how they know that the observer influences the observed. And again, I'm not going to go into too much detail about that, but the point is that time only happens because we have minds, because we're aware, because we can make free choices. It's our free choices that determine our futures, our destinies, and so on. And the point that he realized, anyone wants to know it in more detail, if you look for his book called What is Life, published by Cambridge University Press, he showed that actually the fact that time comes from our minds means that our minds must be eternal, because we can't end in time if we made time. And also the other conclusion that he drew is that our fundamental nature of all mind, of all sentient being, is that fundamentally we're all one. And that's what the great teachers taught. That's what the Buddha taught. That's what Jesus taught. And Muhammad also in his revelation in the Quran taught about how humankind is better than even anything in heaven, in the sense that we have the potential for free will, that heaven is envious of our freedom of choice.
And the thing we need to remember is that those who seek to divide us by making tribal things of religion, be they within the Muslim faith, the Catholic faith, whatever faith, the Jewish faith, whatever, they are barking up the wrong tree. This incredible demonstration, I think Dr. Silverman's talking about, actually gives us the most incredible proof that something exists beyond the state of atoms, our state of reality, if you like, that makes all of this a total nonsense. And each one of us who falls for this garbage, as I call it, is really very, very foolish indeed, to say the least,
Yeah, that's a big wow. It's amazing, isn't it? So, I mean, do you want to finish that point off there?
I was just going to say that this was something that actually Nigel wrote about many years ago, before any of his books came out in a manuscript that I'm still hoping will be published, where he talks about how matter is actually like frozen thought, and that matter is frozen light and light is frozen thought. Again, I'm not going to go into too much of detail about the physics of it, but it makes perfect sense with the fitting in with what the cosmologists say, that the universe came out of no thingness, right? No matter. The first thing there was light, and then light became matter. Now, the point about the shroud is it's going in reverse, that matter is converting into light. Light can be everywhere instantly all at once, whereas matter is frozen. And again, I won't go into the details of relativity here, but anyone who wants to look into the time dilation equation will see it. Okay, so, and the way that works, to be everywhere all at once, you have to stop being separate. You have to stop being demarcated as your individuality and ego in restriction, because that's what, if we all came from one original source, that's what marks us out as distinct, as individuals, is the fact that we're limited, that we're restricted. And what I believe people like the Buddha and Jesus were alluding to is the totally limitless potential of any human being to be ultimately and totally completely free, and in doing so, then we all become one. As he said, these things that I do, you also can do. And is it not written that you are gods? And he also, whenever he healed someone, he said that he didn't say I've healed you or that God has healed you. He said your faith has healed you, that the person has actually done it to themselves. He was always trying to, in the modern sense, you could say big up. He was always trying to big up each individual human being and their capacity, not not trying to put himself on a pedestal as being a unique exception that is coming to tease us and say, no, look what I can do and you can't. He was saying, you can be just as magnificent as I am.
Yeah, and there are all these different examples, Ian, of these authorities like Jesus and the main masters of the religions and so on. And you've got the New Agers claiming masterships in various other designations, whatever, ordinations and so on. But the real point, I think, of it all, and that this Christian teacher said, was